Welcome back everyone, Jasmine here for another FPL video. In this video we're going to be going over that double game week 19 and that blank game week 18 and seeing how we can best utilise our teams to get the best results. So if you find yourself sitting in that bottom part of the table or mid-range table and you're looking to make some moves, this is the video for you. We're going to be touching on differential players, some teams that have the best game weeks, explaining the best ways to use your chips and your wildcards heading into this, because remember, this might be a double game week, but there will be more coming up, so you don't want to blow everything now, considering later on in the season there's definitely going to be some more double game weeks coming up. So let's get right down to it and see if we can help. Alright, so to start off this video we're going to touch on the chips and wildcards. Now, a lot of you have obviously played FPL for a few years, so you kind of got your hand on these kind of chips and how to best utilize them and your wildcards, but some don't. So let's touch on where they come into play, how they're best used, and if you haven't used them, how to best use them going forward. So per season, you get 2 wildcards. And this year round, you get the first wildcard from game week 1 and it ends up finishing this week, game week 16. So game week 17, you should have a new wildcard. Now, whether to use that or not, it's completely up to you. But remember, later on in the year, there's going to be more game weeks where you're going to have double game weeks, blank game weeks, and things like that. So holding some chips, holding some wildcards, holding something for those later game weeks can really make a dent when everybody starts to drop off, considering they've used everything. So keep that in mind. The other big chip that you want to have is the free hit. Now, if you're like myself and you've already used your free hit token, heading into game week 18 and game week 19, I'm going to touch on how to best maneuver yourself to have a team that's decent to compete for both those weeks. But for those that haven't used free hit, the best thing about that chip is for a game week 18 where nobody's really playing, you only got a few games, you can use that free hit, bring in as many of those players for those game weeks as you can. So game week 18, you can have a team stacked full of everybody playing, clean up some points where a lot of other players are going to have maybe 2 or 3 players playing. Then you're going to have a boost. What's going to happen is by game week 19, your team's going to revert back to its original team. And then you're going to be good to go for game week 19. So ideally, the free hit chip is built for this scenario. The other chips that you obviously have is the triple captain and the bench boost. Now they're pretty self-explanatory. Bench boost, anybody on your bench, all your points get played. So in a game week 19, where you want to stack your team full of as many double game week players as possible, if you can line your bench with those players too, and you play your bench boost, that's going to be amazing for you. Same as triple captain. A double game week is a good week to use your triple captain chip. Someone like Salah coming up against Newcastle and Man U might be a good choice to use. Now we're going to touch on some differential players soon, but the triple captain is perfectly placed for this kind of thing. So now that you understand what the chips and free and wildcards kind of are used for, let's go right into the next section. Now, this next section we're going to be touching on who has the best fixtures, but not just game week 19, but also game week 18, considering they are tied together pretty well. So as you can kind of see, there's a bit of a graph here. Now I've picked the 8 best teams that have the best game weeks. So that doesn't mean there's teams that are not going to have games coming up in these 2 game weeks that aren't worth bringing in, but these 8 teams kind of had the best lineup. Now this lineup here was done in game week 15, so game week 16 results may change this a little bit, especially for teams like Newcastle, where they've got Arsenal coming up, and Arsenal have seemed to have picked up some form again. But let's start from the top. Obviously, the best, in my opinion, who has the best game week 19 is West Ham. They've got Burnley and West Brom at home. Now, West Ham haven't been in the greatest form lately, but there's definitely an option there to boost their form back. Now, take into account they do have a blank game week 18, but 19 a big game week. So bringing in players from West Ham will serve you quite well. And there's quite a few to touch on. Players like Souček, players like, in my opinion, now that Antonio's back fit, he's almost like a must-have differential player. So we're going to go and touch on some more differentials later, but keep in mind, West Ham players are good ones to find. Now, in second place, for their best fixtures, they don't have a double game week, but it's Man City. but they have a very solid 2 games in the 2 weeks. So having Man City players in your team will serve you quite well. Having Brighton in game week 18, they're going to hopefully start to pick up some form again like they've been doing lately, and they're going to start running through them. Sterling's caught some form, their defence is really solid, so bringing in quite a few Man City players and stacking your team out isn't a half bad choice. And then for game week 19 is Crystal Palace. Now Palace obviously have had a bit of a rough time the last few weeks, but they did seem to get their feet back under the table. So, but both of these games for Man City are at home, so I expect nothing less than Man City running through both of these teams. So having a couple of Man City players in your team will serve you quite well. Now, same concept for Spurs as Man City. They have a game week 18 and a game week 19 fixture. Now, the reason I put Spurs in 3rd place is, Villa's a toughish kind of game, and Sheffield away isn't easy, but both of those games and the run that Spurs players have coming up, I can't look past them. They should be pushing back to getting that top 4 spacing, even pushing on from that, because their run is by far the best run of the next 6 game weeks. So Villa away, tough game, but Mourinho's style is kind of suited to this counter-attacking Villa team. And then Sheffield away. Obviously Sheffield aren't great this season, so hopefully they bang in some goals. So look to bring in some Spurs players. Again, it's not a double game week, it's a game players to have for both game weeks, so you're not going to miss out on a blank game week 18, but you're going to get a good game week 19 too. Now, the next best double game week team is Chelsea. They've got Fulham and Leicester. Now, if they can get their form back together and produce some goals, that should be a pretty good double game week for Chelsea. Players like Tammy Abraham and Giroud, they've been okay in form. Pulisic coming back in, he'll start banging in some goals hopefully. Even Kurt Zuma in the defence, he's obviously a threat all the time. Chilwell as well, going to be getting some points. So look to bring in some Chelsea players for that double game week. They'll serve you, I believe they'll serve you quite well. Now we move on to 5th place. Now, this is the one I touched on earlier. I had Newcastle up at 5th, but with the Callum Wilson injury to his ankle, he might be still a bit flaky, so that's their kind of goal threat gone. But they do have a decent Sheffield game, so they should get a win, if not a draw, so maybe some defence in there. But even game week 19, Arsenal were looking very, very shoddy, but in the last 2 games they've managed to turn it around and get their feet back. So maybe Arsenal becomes a bit more of a difficult game. Maybe they slip over again. So Newcastle's a bit of a treacherous one. Maybe don't look to bring in Newcastle players, but if you have Newcastle players, it's not going to be a terrible thing. You don't need to offload them very quickly. Now going to the 6th spot, that's Liverpool. Liverpool have an excellent double game week. Now, this is a team where obviously they've got Man U up, and then they've got Burnley away, at home, but both these games are at home. And Liverpool's home record has been exceptional. So players like obviously Salah will perform quite well here. Having Salah as your captain going to serve you very well. Now, whether you triple captain him here or not is a whole nother question. But players also, like as a differential, I'd bring in players like Mane. I would look to move in my team. If I'm sitting mid-table or bottom echelon of the table, but I want to make a bit of a move and I can't bring in, well, I can bring in Salah, I probably wouldn't. I'd bring in Mane. Only because he's owned by like a substantially less amount of people. He's probably going to score the same kind of points. He's probably going to get about the same kind of return. So why bring in the guy that's owned by like 60% of the league when you could bring in a guy that's owned by less than 10? He's got to make a bigger dent. If you can get both of them in your team, you're going to be in for a good time. So if you can stack your team with Liverpool players, now keep in mind their defence is falling apart again. Matip's out injured, Gomez is still out, Van Dijk's still out, so we're probably going to be playing with a Fabinho in the back line again, and we're going to be playing with one of the young boys, Nat Phillips or the Williams brothers. So that back line's not the greatest. Maybe a Robertson, he's been pretty solid all season, maybe a Trent, but he's quite expensive, both of them. So I would look to bring in more solid defensively defenders rather than attacking minded defenders, because I feel like Liverpool's attack threat from those defending positions is not as big as it was last year. Moving on to that is obviously Man U. Obviously they've got Liverpool in return, and then Fulham after that. But again, double game week, you're going to get some points. So players like Rashford, I think, is going to kick off quite well. So he's going to. Bruno obviously has been scoring points all season, so he's going to be quite good. Even maybe a defensive side of things, having a player like Bailey or something like that, who's a bit of a threat in the box. Even Maguire, who's a bit of a threat. But yeah, like. Those two teams are going to have solid points. So if you can get double ups of Liverpool players or Manchester United players, then you should definitely look at doing that. And then the final spot, I would go with Wolves, who have Everton and West Brom in game week 18 and 19. So again, another one of those teams that's going to cover you for the 2 weeks. It's not going to be stacking game week 19, but it's going to be giving you points for both weeks. Now, Wolves obviously are in a bit of a shaky place with form at the moment. They almost got a clean sheet this morning against Man U. But players like Romain Saiss, for example, very good in terms of the attacking threat. He's pretty much on the end of every set piece. He's the guy they aim for. So someone like him who's quite cheap, quite a good differential, it's good to have in your team. He's going to maybe pop up with a goal here and there. And if Wolves can keep the doors shut, they get also the clean sheet bonus. So he could really rack up some points for you. So yeah, so that touches on who's got the best game week 18 and game week 19 fixtures coming up. So let's move on to the next spot and see if we can build a team around these. Now, this part here is how to best utilise for game week 19. Now, I've started with the first wildcard, and now that obviously has kind of run its course for game week 16. So if you had that, I would have recommended playing that for building a team around game week 19. Now, as you can see in this flow chart, it's a pretty simple flow chart, but if you had the first wildcard and you still had your free hit, then I would have used my wildcard before game week 16 to build for the second half of the season, but then using my free hit card in game week 18. So if you've got your free hit, use it for game week 18. Build a team around getting game week 18 players in, whilst your main team is built for game week 19, all right? I wouldn't use my free hit to bring in as many game week 19 players as possible. I would use it in the opposite spectrum. Get as many game week 18 players in there as possible, because people are gonna have very bad game week 18s. And if you can have a really good one and a really solid game week 19, you're gonna really make a dent. So it's not doubling up on game week 19 as such, but more making both weeks good rather than a singular week amazing. Now, if you don't have that free hit and you still have your wild card from before game week 16, I would have used my wild card in game week 16 to build for a team for the game week 19. So got as many double game week players in coming up as possible, regardless of their fixtures for game week 17 and 18. All right. Now, if you don't have your free hit like me, and you don't have a wild card like me, the first wild card that is, then I would be trying to slowly maneuver in for the next few weeks as many players that are going to have a good solid game weeks for game week 18 and 19. So revert back to the previous part of this video showing who had the best game weeks coming up, but try to get in slowly 1 or 2 transfers. I wouldn't go too crazy making 3 transfers and taking a big 8-point hit, but if you can get a -4 but you can bring in players that are going to be very solid for game week 19 without using any chips or wildcards, then do it. That's what I would be doing. That's what I'm going to be doing. I might take a hit this week because of bringing a player in that's not necessarily got an amazing fixture, but I'm thinking 2 weeks ahead. You know, that player's going to have a double game week, or he's going to have a really solid game week 18, 19. So that would be the strategies. If you've used your free hit and you've used your original wildcard, then basically try to transfer in as many players over the next couple of weeks as possible. Now, if you have used your free hit and you've used your wild card and now you've got the new wild card, I would not use that new wild card for these 2 game weeks. As I said earlier in the video, there's going to be more double game weeks. There's going to be more issues where teams have COVID related issues. They have to stack a game in there. Obviously you've got FA Cups, you've got the community, the charity, what do you call it, the other cup, Carling Cup coming up too. So you're going to have teams trying to slot in games along the way. So there's going to be more double game weeks coming up, and I can see by about game week 30 that there's going to be a big game week double up somewhere. So holding on to your wild card for that period of time will really help you out. So my advice is if you've got your new wildcard card, don't use it. Do not use it for game week 18, game week 19. Hold on to that wild card because it's going to be more valuable for later in the season than it is going to be trying to just stack your team for this game week. You're going to basically stack your team for this game week by bringing in as many double game week players as you can, and then realize that those players that you just brought in have pretty horrible fixtures moving forward, and you're going to be stuck with these players and you're going to have a terrible 4 or 5 weeks trying to shuffle them out. So don't do that. Build a solid team like you've been doing all season around bringing in 1 or 2 differential players rather than stacking for a singular game week, and especially considering later on in the season we're going to have more double game weeks. All right, so don't use that second wildcard. That's my advice there. Now, like I said, there were some differential players that I would be looking at to bring in for these few weeks coming up too. Now let's start with the obvious choice, and that's Rashford. This guy is pivotal to pretty much anything good at Man U at the moment. So, like you can see, 7 goals, 4 assists this season, very good. And his game week 19, he's got that double game week with Liverpool Fulham. In the last 4 weeks alone, he's been bringing in 7.5 points per game, which is very, very good. He's one of the most informed players, and the best part, he's owned by almost nobody. So bringing him in as the big expensive differential, maybe replacing someone like a KDB who's been underperforming, isn't a bad shout at all. Now, as I said, Man City also have a very solid double week coming up, so they've got the game in 18 and 19 against Brighton and Palace, and who better to bring in than their striker guy that's in form, and that's Raheem Sterling. 4 goals, 4 assists, on fire at the moment. Everything that's going well up front for Man City is happening because of Sterling. Obviously, he's quite expensive, it's 11.4 mil. But maybe if you're looking for an alternate solution to, say, an expensive striker like Kane, then maybe Sterling is your guy. Bring him in. Nobody owns him. He's very, very low owned, but he's going to climb very rapidly with the 18 and 19 fixtures, and obviously the fixtures prior to these 2 weeks, because Man City have a very good run coming in. So definitely look at bringing in someone like a Raheem Sterling. Now, my biggest shout as a differential is definitely Mikel Antonio for West Ham. Now, he's just come back from injury, but as I said, West Ham have the best double game week coming up, and he's going to be owned by nobody, and he's going to be quite cheap. So if you've got someone up front like a Dominic Calvert-Lewin or a Bamford or a Che Adams or someone like that who you're looking to move out, my advice is someone like a Che Adams hasn't been performing quite well, and I'm looking to move him out. Then Mikel Antonio is the guy. He's the guy I'm going to be trying to bring in just before game week 19, and I hope that things go well, because believe me, West Ham need a striker, and now that he's back in from injury, he's going to be playing. He's not owned by hardly anyone. He's got 3 goals before he went down injured. Burnley and West Brom at home, it's going to be a slugfest between those 2 teams, and he's owned by nobody. It's a massive differential player right here. I'd be looking to bring in Mikel Antonio for those West Ham fixtures. Now, if you're looking for some defensive solidity, again, another Man City player, and that's John Stones. Brighton and Palace, so they should not be conceding any goals in these 2 games, and they've been very solid recently. 5 clean sheets this season, very, very cheap, 4.9 mil. It looks like Stones and Diaz have made this amazing partnership. They've finally figured out their centre-back pairing, and he's owned by nobody, so a massive differential. So he's not going to get on the end of many attacking threats, but he's going to be very solid for your clean sheet bonus, getting 6 to 8 points, depending on how well he plays. But yeah, if you need to bring in some more Man City players for those 2 weeks and even the weeks prior, and you need a solid defence, then John Stone's your money. He'll definitely help you free up some money for that attack line. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have Salah in your team for Liverpool, don't bring him in. Everybody is going to be holding Salah. Now, if you want to be the guy that stands out different to everyone else, Mane's your guy. Now, Mane's found the net in the recent weeks, and he's starting to pick up some form again. Now, Trent's back in the team, those crosses are coming in. He's way more of an attacking threat than he was earlier in the season. So obviously Salah's good. Obviously Salah's going to bang in goals. Obviously he's a very good captain decision. But if you're sitting at that bottom end of that table and you're looking to make a bit of a splash and change things up a little bit, then Mane is the guy for you. Now, if you already have Salah and you want to try to double up on a Liverpool player, then I wouldn't look any further than Mane. Mane, Salah are your pair. That's the 2 guys to have. So, 6 goals, 5 assists, he's very expensive. Obviously, he's going to be taking up a lot of your money in your team, but he's going to return you points. He's got 5.5 in the last 4 game weeks, so he's very solidly in form right now. So, he is owned by, I think, about 8% of people, so it's not that big of a ownership either. So he's a very good differential choice, and he can easily score a goal or two against Man U and easily against Burnley too, to have a really solid double game week. Now, another big call is Romain Saiss for Wolves. Now, a complete opposite to John Stones, where John Stones is very defensively strong and going to get you just clean sheets. Romain Saiss is very offensively strong. Now, every free kick, every corner, anything that's going into that box as a static set piece, Romain Saiss is the target. He is an absolute baller in the air. So he might not get you the clean sheets because obviously Wolves haven't had a solid defence this season, but he's going to score a goal every now and then. So you might find that in that game week 19 fixture, especially against West Brom, that he's going to pop up and score a goal. Like you can see, he's got 4 clean sheets, he's got 2 goals, and he's only 5 mil. So he's a very solid differential choice if you need him in your team. Now, the final choice for a differential player is Harry Kane. Now, been out of form for the last few weeks, but their run of Villa and Sheffield United and their previous game weeks before the 18th game week, he's going to hopefully be back in form, bagging in some goals. 9 goals, 10 assists this season. Obviously, him and Son have been on fire, unplayable. So he's, again, a very expensive player to have, 11 mil, but having him in your team, you can expect him to return results almost every game. Hopefully he gets back into some form and heads into these 2 game weeks as a very solid choice. Now, he is owned by quite a lot of people. That might drop off if he continues to underperform, so keep your eye on him. But if you're looking to bring in that pivotal top-end striker, then Kane's your guy. Now, obviously that was a lot of information in a very shortish kind of video, so hopefully you can take it in, use some of the points that I've brought up, some of the players, the differentials to help you get ahead for game week 18 and game week 19. Like I said, don't be using that second wild card for game week 19. It will come back to bite you, but do use that free hit. If you can use that free hit and you still got it, then I would be using it in game week 18, trying to get a good game week 18 and then subbing in some players with my transfers for game week 19, rather than going all out with my free hit for game week 19 and sacrificing 18. Alright, so keep that in mind, and this has been another FPL video from Jasmine, and I hope to see you next time.